Okay, so one question I get a lot that I'm pretty sure Matt gets, so I'm going to pose this question to him. It has to do with training and basically periodization and the frequency in which we change the programs. I always get asked routinely, can I get an update to my workouts? Can I change the lift I'm doing? So basically my question to you, Matt, is what is your thought process on the frequency in which we should change up exercises and, how do we go about training?
Okay. So as you guys know, for those of you guys that have been a part of the site for any length of time, I'm a big believer in consistency within training variables. I think it's huge to monitor. One of the best ways I think you can monitor progress, especially in the off season, for those of you guys that don't stay like crazy lean, if you're getting progressively stronger within hypertrophy rep ranges, good things are going to be happening to your physique once you strip that back off. Now, when it comes to exercise selection, I'll talk a lot about myself because it's applicable and it's an experienced environment that I know. So I get asked a lot about when should you change out movement patterns or when should you not change out movement patterns? What happens when a movement pattern stalls? I think as bodybuilders, for one, it's fun. I think it keeps a sense of engagement involved. If you get strong, if you aim to get strong across a wider variety of exercises. But for me, that's very body part specific. For example, I'll talk about legs. For me, I think absolutely the best movement for me to do for legs is hack squats. So I'm going to try to get as best as I can at hack squats. And when a hack squat stalls, I'm not going to change out that hack squat. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to kind of realign my rep ranges, bring the rep ranges back up, try to get stronger at a higher rep range, and then work back down into a lower rep range, and hopefully that correlates into strength as I drop down the rep range. But in other movement patterns, so with legs, for example, whatever movements that I can get the most knee flexion in are the movements that I'm going to stick to. So a barbell squat, it just doesn't really have that much carryover for me. It's a lot of hip drive, it's a lot of glute. The hip hinge, the knee flexion isn't as great, so therefore I'm not getting as much of a degree of stretch in my quads. So there's no real benefit to me to substitute a hack squat for a barbell squat. I just kind of need to reprogram and reshift the rep range of the hack squat and then work back down. Whereas something like back, I think I get a lot of benefit from doing a variety of back rows. Now, do I do them all within one workout? No. But if I basically have 9 rows that I like to do, split that over 3 workouts, that's 3 rows per workout. That gives me a lot of then ability to progress within those movement patterns because I'm hitting them every 3rd workout. So that's another way that I do it. But to simply address the question of when to change out movement patterns, when you start to fail within a movement pattern, you need to figure out if that's just you've basically maxed out your strength, or if the assistant muscle groups that you're using, say in a lockout movement, are failing you, and then kind of address those things. So for example, an easy one to figure out is on a bench press or a bench press movement. If you're starting to really fail on all your bench press movements and your weights aren't progressing, you need to probably address your shoulder strength more, your tricep strength more, to then allow your chest to progress more, because your body can only hold on so much load at one time if everything around it and supporting muscle groups isn't supporting it. So hopefully that answers the question to some extent. But you guys gotta, within all this, there's no one set answer. For me, hack squats work great. I think everybody at the table would echo that. But other movement patterns, for example, with myself, I can probably do some back rows that Nick can't do because I'm not arm dominant. So with Nick, he has to be very specific in the movement patterns that he does to make sure that he's not rowing with his biceps and he's actually rowing with his back. Whereas with me, because my arms aren't strong like that, my back is always going to fail within the movement. It's not going to be my biceps taking over because my biceps aren't stronger than my back. So that's one thing that we've addressed with him. But you got to know these patterns for yourself. Within, whether you're working with a coach or not, you really need to be in tune with your own training to get the most out of it in terms of exercise selection. Because even within a program that I write, ultimately it's up to you guys to decide which movement patterns you're going to select, because I'm not in the gym with you. I don't know, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, where your leverages are, and all those things. But I would say find the movements that work the best for you. Don't stick to a set of rules, because it's not about a set of rules. It's about finding what works best for you. Seek to get as strong in those movements as possible. If you hit sticking points, figure out why. For in leg movements, are your glutes weak? you know, eventually your quads can only take so much. If your glutes are weak, then that's going to impact your ability to then move loads at a higher level. So just a few things. Nick can probably talk some more about him specifically, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, I'll use squats as an example. I got really, really strong on a free weight squat, doing like 6 1/4 on each side for like 6 to 8 reps. And even though my legs got really, really strong, I really didn't really notice any true size to my legs. So then I even would, you know, try and switch the rep ranges up and try and do a high rep range to see if that would even benefit. And yeah, I would get a good pump from it, but I just didn't feel my legs grew from it until, you know, actually me and Kyle started training together, and we did a lot more leg pressing and more hack squatting, and that's really where my legs, I think, grew the most. And then even this year with Matt changing it up again and staying in a more higher rep range, I'd say about 15 to 20 reps, my legs have now even blown up even more, and then now have a more volume look to them. So it all comes down to, if it doesn't work, just don't do it. Don't try to make it work. It obviously doesn't work. And I can use deadlift as another example. I used to deadlift for years. Deadlifting was probably one of my favorite exercises. And again, no matter how heavy I went, no matter how many reps I would do, I didn't really notice any true growth in my back until I switched to doing rack deads, where I could actually feel my back working, versus when I would deadlift, I just felt like I was more moving the weight rather than using my back to do the weight. So rack deads allowed me to work my back and actually feel it more. And that's when I started to notice a true difference in my back, really.
And basically, just to close out, I think being consistent is what matters here, right? On a daily basis, when we have a diet, whether you're with a coach or you're not, I think it's important that, you know, you're not changing every meal based on how you feel, right? You're probably trying to be consistent to track progress. So when you're in the gym, there's really nothing should change, right? So if you pick something for a week, I always suggest to most of my clients, or, you know, myself personally, I try to pick an exercise that I feel. I go by feel a lot, because just because it looks cool and you could lift heavy, you have to be realistic, right? So when I see people that squat, people ask me, why don't I deadlift or squat anymore? And for me personally, I got to the point to where the cost versus reward really it didn't benefit me anymore, right? The pros and cons of me doing one more rep with an exercise, now my lower back would hurt, so now my back trainer would be suffering, you know, 2 days later. So I think for me personally, I'm very realistic, and I tell all my clients that. So it's okay if you're strong and you could use strength as a tool, but at the end of the day, I'm not saying you have to measure your muscle size, but at the end of the day, if you look when you diet down, if you're not any bigger and you spent the whole year squatting, maybe it's time for you to move away from an exercise, right? Instead of, the answer might not be 500 pounds. If you're already squatting 500 pounds, the answer is not 600 pounds. Maybe it's pick a new exercise. You can maybe do it once in a while, but from time to time, I think you need to kind of just try something different, right? I think there's a quote that basically states, you know, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of people get caught up on. They kind of see Instagram, and I'm guilty for it in the past, where I see someone do something cool, oh, I want to try that. And before I know it, I look back a month prior, and I don't know if I got any stronger. I don't know if I look any better, because I wasn't consistent, right? So I think that's the main thing. You always want to be able to look back 6 months ago. Hey, I was my strongest then. I looked my best then. What was I eating? What was I doing? What was my supplementation like? So consistency, I think, is the most important.
Yeah, Nick, they both brought up good points, but what Kyle just said too about Instagram, like, I appreciate all the support that I get on Instagram. But something that it's still to this day like boggles my mind is when I post a movement, I'll get multiple tags on that video that I posted saying such and such, let's try this tonight, such and such, let's do this in our next workout. Like, why? Just because I'm doing it. Now, granted, if you want to implement something long term, absolutely. But you can't have this buffet menu selection of your training and expect to know where you're going. You know, like Kyle just said, you're going to end up month, 2 months, 3 months. Basically, if you're flipping through Instagram every day picking your workout, you got things all messed up. You should be picking things based off of what's best for yourself, not what your buddy's doing, not what some Instagram famous person's doing, not what Jordan Peters is doing because he's the strongest in the world. Like, he got there because he stuck to the same thing. He stuck to his system. He wasn't picking and prodding everybody else's system to get to where he's at. And that's, again, like, I could talk about it till I'm blue in the face. Like, the reason why Nick is where he's at is because he's consistent with everything that he does. And it's a system for him, you know. I think especially he's traveled. He's become the world traveler over the past month. But I would say when he's at home, like every day he wakes up at the same time. Every night he goes to bed at the same time. His routine, his pattern, everything's the same. And there's a reason for that, because he wants to be the best in the world. Now, granted, those of you guys watching this, you have to take that in the context of where your goals are and where you want to be. But ultimately, if you're getting frustrated in the gym, go back to, am I being consistent? You know, and again, Kyle, he nailed it with the diet. Like, you guys just don't like randomly freestyle your diet every day, or I hope you don't. That seems common sense, but yet at the same time, you're randomly freestyling your workouts, expecting to make progress. You know, so just think about that. Everything should be in sync. Your sleep should be in sync. Everything. If you want to be the best you can be, everything's got to be a fluid pattern. You know, because that's where the real progress happens.